Questions? Oh no, it's not hard work. Make it disappear. Yeah. Oh, it's on this side. Yeah. So much the dress and give his man.
So Mark, you were in a traffic last month or so?
How quickly did I do it? I would expect a couple of hours detailed discussion of this document.
Oh, good. With my questions.
Oh, so what? I'm trying to get it out. I'm looking at it.
Oh, there is.
You haven't made all these long journeys to sit here and be home in 14 minutes.
Yeah, you just. I've actually driven quite a long
Feel
way.
like doing it now, tomorrow.
You guys have actually driven quite a long way to me here.
Yeah.
Yeah, by train.
Lloyd, all right after surgery?
Welfare of your team, mate.
He was on TV last night, it might be all right. I think he's to the south east, because I put it
On
on,
Konya?
yeah, it's fine.
Oh, well, must be. Yeah. What are you doing about Konya? Promoting it?
Yeah, it's a bit weird. It was something, I don't really know how nothing to do with it, but I'll be able to say about the area.
Just Glyn, we're waiting. I don't want to wait for this one. Might not get it before it's finished.
Sven not coming.
Then has given his apologies. It's 14 minutes, but I will not be going for anywhere.
Hour and 40.
Well, that's 14 minutes of reading that out. You could have said 2 minutes. Loads of people watching. Can't see us yet, can they?
No.
Good.
Bang on 7 o'clock.
There you go. It's on my phone.
There's 18:56:07 on mine. Well, that says 7.
It's wrong.
So according to 12 time at 7.
I think it's
I only have got people here, we've given them a couple of minutes.
It's 7 o'clock.
Benefit of the doubt.
We've got it down well.
It's clear this time.
Well, well supported you.
That's just the last planning meeting, I think it was. Shutting the bridge, which was fun.
Okay, I'm going to start. I will agree at 7 o'clock.
It's 7 hours.
Okay, I believe it's 7 o'clock or probably just gone 7. So can I ask for any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device, please mute it to avoid feedback. Please be advised that this meeting will be recorded and data collected during the recording of this meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting will be added to the Council's website. Welcome everybody to the hybrid local plan panel meeting. I think we have some visiting members remotely, so welcome to those and to all the members of the public. I'd like to advise that the following staff are in attendance here in the Council Chamber: the Head of Planning Services, James Freeman, the Planning Policy Manager, Jill Peat, and Democratic Services. Oh, mine's gone blank, sorry, it's Catherine. Pippa Davis. I'd just like to, we have an emergency evacuation procedure. Can I be assured that everybody here is familiar with the evacuation procedure, or would you like me to read it out? Thank you, that's noted. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Benjamin Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask members to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of June 2021, minutes 42 to 45, as a correct record? As I wasn't here, I'll be relying on your memories.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, that's agreed. Are there any declarations of interest? There are none. And I'd like to advise you that the item on the agenda tonight is a Part A report for recommendation to Cabinet. Item 4 is the Housing Delivery Test Action Plan 2021. When the current administration took over this council, it was severely under-delivering on its housing delivery as per its existing local plan. This meant that we had to add a 20% buffer to our land supply. Since then, we have improved delivery to 89%. That's quite important because that means that the buffer we have to provide is reduced to 5%. This document, when we come to discuss it, I'd like to point out that passing this document, although it's not a mandatory thing, it will give us a stronger position when we get fire appeals. That's enough of me. I'll hand over to Lead Officer Jill Peat to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. The report before you introduces the draft Housing Delivery Test Action Plan. You may already be aware that back in 2017, the government published its housing white paper called Fixing Our Broken Housing Market. It set out a suite of measures that would be introduced to speed up and increase housing delivery. One of those measures that they introduced is the housing delivery test. This is, in essence, a measure that compares the number of dwellings required against the number of dwellings delivered over the preceding 3-year period. For the latest results, Swale scored 89%, and as this is below 95%, the council is asked to prepare an action plan. The purpose of an action plan is to explain any under-delivery and to set out what measures the local planning authority intends to undertake to ensure that under-delivery doesn't continue. Housing delivery in Swale is complex. It is influenced by a number of factors, many of which are beyond the council's control. The delivery rates for housing completions are largely in line with what was anticipated at the time of the examination for the adopted local plan bearing fruits. And the action plan sets out the reasons for under-delivery and key actions arising as a result. The covering report has 2 recommendations. These are that the panel note the content of the HDT action plan and that delegated authority be granted to the Cabinet Member for Planning to agree, with any minor amendments, the action plan for submission to the Secretary of State, and that we publish it on the Council's website. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. If that can be noted, there's a slight change to the recommendation, which I will put to the panel in a minute, and that is with any minor amendments. We normally have that, but it's been missed off of this recommendation, and it would mean that any changes you make wouldn't be able to change. And there is one minor amendment I would like to propose at this point. It is page 18, the map. An out-of-date version of the map has been proposed, which shows an allocation at the south of Sittingbourne, which isn't in the local plan. So a correct version of that map will be submitted, if that's okay. Any questions? Councillor Hunt.
Just on that point, you just said I haven't actually got the map. And if it's on, it doesn't seem to be online.
It's in the printed copies.
Oh, in that one, sorry, it's a different page number for me, that's why.
Okay. Any other questions? Elliot, Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 10, paragraph 2.2, it says opportunities on the Isle of Sheppey at Minster. I'm just wondering why Minster's included here and what site it's referring to.
Yeah, good point. I think that actually should be removed, but or is this past tense? Jill?
Thanks for the question. This particular paragraph is around setting the historical context for where development's been focused, both in the adopted local plan bearing fruit and before that.
So that's a retrospective. It was at Minster. Any other questions? Councillor Jays.
We mentioned in here about the GP to patient ratio. I'm just wondering if at a future meeting we perhaps have the CCG here to explain what they're doing about that. It's a massive issue to all our residents, and it doesn't seem to improve. We heard 2 years ago that we had the highest patient to doctor ratio, and 2 years later we still have the same patient to doctor ratio. So I think it's something for this meeting, because as we go forward with the local plan review, it's all we're going to hear from residents, and rightly so.
That's a very good point. I will defer to Democratic Services. They probably wish that I didn't, but I don't know if we can ask them to this meeting, but I believe the scrutiny committee has the power to bring or I don't think we can summon outside bodies to ask things. So would we like to make that recommendation to scrutiny that they do that?
More than happy.
And we'll see if we can get them here, but I don't think we can. Councillor Bonny? Oh, sorry, are we all agreed with that?
Well, can I talk to that?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, I had a meeting with the CCG because I've exactly the same concerns as you. And I went through their infrastructure delivery plan along with Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing. And it was clear to me that what they had planned were simply extensions to existing GP surgeries, but they are in the process of reviewing their plan, because I think it's written on 2 pages for Swale. So we went through those in some detail. Obviously, some of it was confidential because it was surrounds certain GP practices. So I would suggest it's probably, in terms of timing, is to probably time that for 3 to 4 months' time, when they're a bit more together with what they're doing with their plan, and then hopefully we might get more of a sensible response from that. But I absolutely share council's concerns about provision of healthcare in Swale.
Thank you. Are we all agreed with that then? Yeah, lovely. Any more questions? Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, yeah, I've got questions and comments. Just one question at the moment.
There won't be a chance afterward to make comments, so you might as well
In that case,
get them off your chest.
yeah, sit comfortably. First question, I'll find the right place, is 1.2 on the first page. The document provides commentary on some of the reasons for the borough's housing delivery rates. And I think surely this document would be looking in more details exactly why we're in the position and not just some of the reasons given. Why are we not listing all of the reasons that we're in this situation?
Jill?
That's a good question, because certainly as we've developed and worked on the paper, we believe we've covered off all of the issues that we're aware of. So happy to remove that word.
Well, I think it's fair enough that you're covering your back really by not saying we've commented on all the reasons, because then there might be other reasons. But we could change it to most significant commentary on. Pardon?
All known reasons.
All known reasons. How does that sound, Jill? All known? Are we all happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Hunt.
So 1.5, the primary role of the action plan to identify the reasons for undelivery. But I think looking through it, I don't think that it does do it. And what you said there about we think we've got all the reasons there, but I think there is reasons in there that haven't been covered. And the reason why I said that, as well as Councillor Baldock, you said at the beginning, the document was going to give us a stronger position that appeals. I think we need to make sure everything is absolutely covered in this document, because if there's things that developers are going to use against the council, when we come up to those appeals, if they can pick something out that we haven't included in here or said that we can be able to deal with, I think it's going to be coming back on the council when that point comes up.
Did you comment on that, Jill or James? Jill?
Thanks, those are really helpful comments, Councillor Hunt. I think as we move forward, regardless of what the score is in the housing delivery test, this is a piece of work that all local authorities are encouraged to prepare. Given the amount of additional work that might be involved around taking a deeper dive, what I'd like to propose is that we revisit this for next year's action plan and have a more in-depth look at what sort of issues we might cover in addition to what's already in the report, and
very happy to take suggestions on that. Thank
Okay.
you.
A problem I can see is that a lot of this document, we don't seem to be focusing on the issues really that we have got. I mean, moving it on to next year, okay, but the situation is that we haven't got the 5-year supply now. And if we're going to keep moving things down the road and not really take control of what issues we've got now, it's just a bit of a concern that we sort of bury their heads in the sand a bit and just carrying on with how we've been dealing with things at the moment. And as been said, it's not just a new thing. It has been going on for a while. I think it was flagged up when we at the local plan hearing last time that these issues are going to be rising, that we wouldn't have a 5-year supply from the set-go. So I think really have got to tackle it a bit more and deal with the issues head on. If I carry on going through it at 2.4, there's small things in here, like the need for the new secondary school in Sittingbourne is been already identified. But there's no detail being given about the difficulties in delivering it. And I believe Persimmon have already said that they don't plan to bring the development soon because of the Grampian conditions that have been put on for Junction 5. And I think that KCC are wanting this school now. We all know that we need a school as soon as possible. And again, I think we're not putting in this document enough to say that these are the problems. And whilst it has been identified, there is still major problems in bringing that sort of infrastructure forward. I think we need to bolster that up a bit to really point out what issues we've got. 3.5, says that a number of planning permissions granted for residential developments, but the time of delivery of those dwellings is dependent on a number of factors. And it goes to the point I said, if this is a known issue, what are we going to do to get out of the situation? And the only way to get out of it, whether any of us like it or not, we're stuck with what government are imposing on us. And it's not a political thing. I'm quite happy to say that we are imposed on these issues. But it is the situation we're in, and the reality is we need to build more housing to be able to get out of the problem we've got. And we know allocated sites aren't coming forward, so we need to do more to allow windfall sites, but we need them sooner, and we need to make it clear and manage the expectations of our residents. It's not doing anyone any good where we've just had these windfalls and having to deal with it later on down the line. Figure 2 on page 6 shows how we struggled for years to deliver, but more recently it seems to paint a good picture that we've been delivering more. But it also shows that we also need to do more and really get going to give housing the boost to get above the target. I can't see anywhere in this document how that will be achieved. Whilst later on in the document it states that we don't want to encourage development outside the local plan, maybe it is a reality that we're going to have to again get out of this situation. It says we're worried it undermines the planning process. So I think we need to recognise the issue and take control now rather than not having any control. It's no good getting the planning committee, so these applications get to the planning committee and then having arguments at that time about sites outside the local plan being recommended for approval. Whilst smaller sites aren't a major contributor to their 5-year supply, they do add something, and more sites there, the more sites there are of those, the more they will be adding to that supply. Only last week we lost an appeal in Eastchurch, and it was a bungalow that was refused, which is housing we keep saying that we really need. It was recognised that we don't have a 5-year supply, and the proposal should have been refused under policies ST3 and DM9. But because we don't have control, we can't rely on those policies. Policies which are part of the adopted local plan that this document is saying is up to date and sound. Policies which are, sorry, I would say that this isn't up to date, otherwise we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. I see nothing in the document that accepts the problems and looks at solutions for us to remain in control of planning. Not having control is what undermines the planning process. 3.7 improvements, talking about M2 Junction 5, and I'm pleased that it has been acknowledged that we have got these upgrades and it is helping to deliver the current allocations. It wasn't about future housing when all this was being looked at, remaining to deliver, and it is about now, and now it's coming forward. It's good to help us go some way of getting out of the problem we've got. I think transport infrastructure, when we come to 3.17, I think we need to bolster this one up. The issues around M2 Junction 7, especially, whilst it's now being recognised that this can be included in RIS3, I think my understanding, and I'm happy to be put right on this if I am wrong, that it's only for design and feasibility work. And this could give us another M2 Junction 5 scenario where we're going to start coming up with problems of taking housing forward. And I'm not sure how that's going to be helping with a 5-year supply. It's as we've said before, with making sure that the detail is in this document so it doesn't come back on us. This is a reason why we should really be pushing that it's going to be difficult to get back up to that 5-year supply. The brownfield sites of 3.25, and it's good to see the issues around delivery, but it does raise questions on how additional housing at this location, as seen in the draft local plan, could come forward in a timely manner. It will have the same difficulties and delay on the allocations and would surely impact on future allocations. Again, it's not thinking of the issues we've got now and just pushing them on into the future and hoping it will be all right. 3.29, sorry, I'm going on. This is the house building industry dominated by 4 or 5 large volume builders. And it's true. And again, I think it's recognised throughout the document that this is a problem, but I feel it's a problem that's not being addressed. Whilst being recognised as one of the more affordable areas of Kent, the table above that we have there, which is table, I've got a number in 3.27. That's where I am. It recognises. Sorry, I've moved the page and that's where I was. Yeah, I've got it. I've just it's my notes that I was. It's recognised as one of the more affordable areas of Kent, and the table above shows that we have the highest price increases. But I'm wondering what has been done to investigate this in more detail. We're not building enough houses, and this paragraph recognises that we're dominated by 4 or 5 large volume builders. But what are we doing to get more SMEs into the area? If we've got a problem with big, larger developers, we need to be doing more with SMEs. But I don't think we're doing enough. The draft local plan recognises it, but in my view, it's too late then, and we need some action now. I'm not even sure the proposed policy to encourage SMEs is compliant with the NPPF. As I've already said, we need to be doing more to allow SME developers to bring forward sites not allocated and to boost the 5-year supply. This is something I'd like to see in the document. It's not something that I would like to be saying because I think we should be in control and not having to be in that situation, but it is where we are. The self-build register on 3.30, this is something I've said in the past a number of times, and there's a lot of people who want to self-build that don't even know that a register exists, or I know people I've spoken to in the past have said they didn't even realise it was there and what they had to do. And other authorities are getting people onto their registers, so I'm just question why we're not. I don't believe we can say it's just how it is. I don't think we haven't done enough to help. And whilst it's said that it's an area for action in the draft local plan, I haven't seen enough now, and then it's too late. Again, waiting for the next local plan won't help our 5-year supply for now, which is what we should be concentrating on in this document. Nowhere in any of this analysis it's been recognised that allocated sites have been refused and appeals won. I think this should be noted as a reason towards not meeting the supply. And whilst that appeals that we've lost isn't going to be a massive amount against our 5-year supply, it is an issue that I think needs to be recognised. Otherwise, again, it will come up in the future when it's argued that we haven't done enough. The plan I mentioned before about it being up to date, I don't think it is up to date. It says here in 4.2, it's both up to date and sound. If we had an up to date plan, I would have thought that we wouldn't be having the tilted balance applied. And we wouldn't be having to approve schemes outside the local plan. And 5.6 recognises that we have the tilted balance, but again, how are we going to get out of this? 4.5, the council will continue to monitor the status of allocated sites in the adopted local plan. And they're just wondering what exactly that is going to do with monitoring. Monitoring is okay, but action is needed, and this document is about action. It's already seen that some of the allocated sites haven't come forward and indicated that they would, but they've still been included in the draft local plan, and we need to look in more detail as to why sites aren't coming forward. I've got more, but does anyone want to come back on it?
Yep, thank you. I mean, most of the stuff that you're talking about are issues that are being addressed in the local plan review. We're not able to introduce new measures outside of local plan reviews. We are stuck with this system. So yes, we've got a new SME policy to encourage it once the local plan review has been adopted, and it has the support of a lot of the local SMEs in the area. But we have to go through this painful process of having the local plan review. Much of many of the other points that you've made are exactly what we're trying to do, but this isn't the document that can cover a lot of them. This document is limited largely by the existing local plan and how we can manoeuvre within that. And that local plan, even when it was adopted, didn't deliver or didn't plan to deliver the amount of housing that was needed for the 5-year housing supply. It was mid-terming the major delivery. So a local plan, as we currently have it, was always intended to put us, was always inevitably going to put us in this position. What we are doing is dealing with how we're going to come out of it, and progress has been made. We have got a lower land supply buffer, which is useful. A couple of the other points that you made, I mean, Jill will cover off most of them, but there was one point you made which I might have to come back to after Jill's finished. Oh yeah, there's also a paragraph 3.28 doesn't exist. Yeah, 3.25. That's the allocation within the current local plan at Rushenden, and I think we are addressing. That is another thing that we are addressing in the local plan review. Some of the stalled allocations. That is all part of the work that's been done in other documents and has to come forward as part of the local plan submission. And I know Jill's been working on that recently. So yes, a lot of things that we need to do or that we are doing. I just wonder whether or not this is the correct document to be doing that. So Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I think from a practical point of view, we kind of fall between a rock and a hard place here, because of course the local plan was adopted in 2017 before the housing delivery test was part of national policy. So there was no requirement through the examination to address this, and I believe that had we been in that situation now, we would have negotiated a stepped trajectory rather than an annual figure that we could play catch up on further down the line, which is what was agreed at the examination into bearing fruits. Because what the inspector accepted was that our delivery would be slow in the early years of the plan, but that we could address that under delivery, across the remaining years of the plan period, something that's called the Liverpool method, when looking at 5-year housing land supply calculations. So I think we are in a bit of an unfortunate position in that regard. But, you know, sort of maybe this is a criticism of the planning system generally, that it is very slow and it is very complex. So things like the time taken to prepare sites and agree Section 106 agreements or reserved matters applications, they are complex and they do take a lot of time, and we are constrained in terms of how we deal with that, because obviously that's information that we have to have from the applicant, and there are things that we need to look at, make sure that they're covered off. So it's a really tricky one, and ultimately we do operate within a plan-led system, and even as a planner with a bit of experience, you know, we have struggled to think what else we could do over and above what we're already doing.
So I understand what's being said, and I think what we're being told then is that we're in this situation, and unless we get a 5-year supply back up, we're going to remain in it. And I think there's some confidence that, I think has been said, that we'll get a 5-year supply back, but I don't believe we will be. I think until this local plan review is sorted out and dealt with, I don't think we're going to be having a 5-year supply until that point. And that is a concern that I have got, is that it's not just about having the local plan review dealt with, but taking into account some of the comments that have been made, especially from KCC. You know, how long is it going to take to get this plan to go through? We've got the judicial review challenge as well on it. Is that going to be delaying things? And you know, we should be doing the plan next year, and I have got major concerns that that's not going to be happening unless we do deal with something. This position isn't going to go away. And I think on that, from what's been said, I mean, what is the reasons for the action plan then? Because if there's nothing that we can do in that time period between the adopted local plan and local plan review, what are we doing an action plan for? You just wait until they say we're not going to do it, and we'll wait till next time when we can deal with it. There's guidance obviously that sits behind that. Obviously, I know that everybody's read, and that gives detail on some of the actions that can be taken. And I think when we look at the actions that are being proposed here, I think we may have misinterpreted, or it's giving the wrong impression on some of these. I mean, we continue with progress in the local plan review, but that isn't really an action. It's just what we have to do anyway. We were told every 5 years we need to do that. So I'm not sure how it's an action. You're looking at the SLAR update and considering the future needs. It's not an update, it's the recent SLAR for the draft local plan is a requirement of national policy. And again, it's not an action. The council will continue to work with partners to secure funding for road improvements. Again, it's not an action, it's what needs to be done anyway. And we can go through with all of the ones that have been put forward, and it just seems to be it's what we have to do. What actions are we actually coming up with? And there is some actions in there, such as paragraph 051 of the guidance. And it's not on that document, it's in the actual thing, but using brownfield registers to grant permission in principle to previous developed land. That's what we've been told by government is the sort of thing that we can do in these action plans. So how do we bring that sort of thing forward when we've been told we can't then do it until there's a local plan review? if we're in a situation where we've got a big hole with no 5-year supply, these are things that actions that can be taken, encourage the development of smaller, medium-sized sites. Those should be the things that we should be able to do before we get to the point of having another local plan. So haven't got these problems now.
Yeah, I think the point is that we are confident we will be meeting a 5-year housing supply shortly, and that the actions that we've taken and progress that we've made will deliver that, but that on that basis, at appeals, the inspectors should recognise the fact that we are moving to a position where we like to have a 5-year housing supply soon, and shouldn't therefore tilt against us to the extent that they might if we weren't showing the confidence that we'll have that 5-year housing supply. It's a perfectly valid position to say that you don't think we'll have that 5-year housing supply. We're very close to it already. We don't all have a crystal ball. We don't know everything that's going to be happening, but we believe we will get there shortly. You have doubts. That's perfectly valid. But we don't.
As I say, I hope we do get there.
Councillor Bonnet. Oh, so Joe, did you want to respond to anything as well? Sorry, James, you've got some points.
Just briefly, just make one or two specific points and one general point. So the general point is we already had an action plan previously from about two years ago. So this is sort of a refresh of that action plan. And at that time when we produced the action plan, it was actually commented on by the Planning Advisory Service and others that it was a good action plan compared to what other authorities have done. That's a general point. The other general point is I think the way sometimes this is worded, it's sort of like past tense, but the Borough Council is actually active in promoting what's happened already. So those actions take time to come through in terms of the delivery, I think. What I'm saying is there are actions in there which have been actioned already, which will come through to the system as it stands. On specific points, I think there could be just highlighted mention in terms of the actions we're doing then to Junction 7, because we are in collaboration with our neighbouring authorities, particularly Canterbury and Dover, who are also constrained by M2 Junction 7. And we're in discussions with the Highways England and Kent County Council to see if that programme can be accelerated. As you rightly said at the moment, it's just the design and feasibility in RIS 2, with the expectation at the moment that it will come forward as a major project in RIS 3, but the timeframes for that are a bit longer than we would probably like, given where we're at with the local plan review. So there are those discussions taking place, and Highways England have been positively reacting to that. But obviously, it takes time when you've got a large government body with quite major financing to secure changes in decision to accelerate that programme. But those discussions are taking place, and we can refer to those in the document, I think, quite rightly. And whether it's appropriate and speak to Councillor Baldock, we can just put a few signals in here in terms of the direction of travel we've got in the local plan review to encourage SMEs and small builders and self-build and custom build as well, which are in the policies. I'm sure we could cover that in the document.
Thank you, James. That received widespread support among the committee, that proposal. And it's also, I think it's worth mentioning that we did bring in an interim policy to support housing for the elderly in the park home policy, which may enable some developments which wouldn't otherwise have come forward. But that was more about meeting a need for the elderly, something that hopefully we may now see some applications coming through across the mainland, meeting a specific need. But it does help with meeting the housing as well, I suppose. Councillor Bonnie, did you have your hand up?
Yes, please. Thanks. I'm surprised Councillor Hunt has indicated that we should depart from the local plan for allocations. I think that goes against all good plan making and the whole premise of having a local plan. I think it's clear from the documents in front of us with our delivery of 89%, we're significantly above where we were previously, and there's been substantial progress. Although I hear my community all going, there's too many houses being built. And I think we all, well, certainly I'll speak for myself here, think the housing numbers, the targets that are set are too high. One of the big risk factors we're staring down the barrel of right now, given that stamp duty concession has ended recently, and we've seen an enormous growth in house prices since this document was published, is there is a significant risk of if there is a housing market fall, and we do need to, you know, be cognizant of that. But equally, I'm aware, certainly in my ward, a particularly large site, where there's been land banking, and it means as a local authority, we're pretty powerless to stop that. And it's really unfortunate because that does have a significant impact on our figures. And in fact, it's extremely frustrating that you set housing target, you have all these people rush in, say, yes, yes, we want to apply for this on this site, and then sit with it for years and years. And it is absolutely deliberate in my mind that some of these sites are being sat on. And you mentioned the secondary school there, and that is a case in point. I mean, we know that we had a huge impact this year in secondary school places where we know a number of kids from Sittingbourne, I think it's about 70, who are having to go to the Isle of Sheppey every day in September because they can't get into a Sittingbourne school. And that's with the Sittingbourne schools all expanding. The secondary school is a real issue and does need to be focused upon. What can we actually do? I think whilst Councillor Hunt was rather critical there, I think the officer has said quite clearly that our action plan was previously seen as a good one. And it doesn't mean that we've got to come up with a whole load of absolutely new blue sky actions. It's what we're working on as an authority. And we've done an awful lot of work, I think, over the last couple of years in order to put a local plan review in place. So I think what's been drafted and is before us is actually a fairly good and robust way of dealing with this. And I'm pleased that we're not at a much lower number. I can breathe a sigh of relief. So I thank the officers for their work here. And I really, it is a focus on the system. You know, the system that we live with is arcane, bureaucratic, but it's not one that we as a local authority can control. We have to work within the parameters of what we've got. And unfortunately, this government has set this as the straitjacket we have to live in. Thank you.
You were named Councillor Hunt. I don't know if you want to come back.
No.
Anybody else? Councillor Gould. No, then we can't do that.
Thank you. I was just really seeking to understand that how the figure 1 relates to the housing delivery, because it looks to me that if that blue line was not met, that was the original trajectory, but that didn't happen. Is that correct? And that would be the reason for the under delivery of the earlier years, and that continued shift of that peak to the right is actually why we can have the confidence that the targets will be more likely to be met going forward. Is that a correct understanding of it?
Jill?
That's absolutely spot on. Taking the example of N2 Junction 5, at the time of the local plan examination back in 2017, the timescales for having that resolved were different to the reality. So yes, everything has, as things have progressed, that peak has moved to the right queue.
Welcome, Councillor Marchington.
Apologise, Chair.
Okay, I'm glad you're here because you've had a lot to say about this report in the press. And the one quote from you says, the report states it, by which you meant coalition, will support ever more housing in the future. Can you just refer us to where it says that? Because I would like to potentially amend that.
Thank you, Chair, but the statement in the press is not quite the words that I used on the meeting, and no, it's not referring to that actual specific.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. I know exactly where you're coming from. Okay, thank you. In that case, if there's no more, Councillor Gould.
So my other query was that I'm just trying to find the table again now, but there was a COVID amended target for this year, which seemed to imply that we'd actually exceeded our target, and therefore, why do we still have to have the 5% buffer if we've actually exceeded the target as amended by COVID, or admittedly it wasn't quite up to the 736 figure?
It was a 1 year and we have to roll the average. Unless Jill's going to add more to that.
I'd just like to say that when a local planning authority is calculating its 5-year housing land supply position, they must always use a buffer. The minimum buffer you can use is 5%. If your score is below 85%, a 20% buffer must be applied.
Any more questions? I see no hands. So with the slight amendment to recommendation 2, are we agreed with that amendment?
Agreed.
Okay, then can I take recommendations 1 and 2 together? Are we agreed? Oh, have I got to do this one? Show of hands, yeah. Oh yeah, back here, show of hands. Show of hands, please. Well, that's unanimous. Thank you all very much. And enjoy Sunday night, apart from Carol.